Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Welcome to episode 54. If you haven't listened to episode 53, then you should do. We split the Paul McIlroy episode into two parts. There's so much that was discussed, so much information. And I know that some of you may need to just go away, have a think about what we were talking about, and then come back having analyzed and gone through that episode multiple times. We recommend you go back, listen to it a couple of times, because if you're the kind of person who wants to program for yourself, or you're learning how to do all this stuff, you can't learn from anyone better than Paul McIlroy. So enjoy this episode, the remainder of our discussion with Paul McIlroy. It was fascinating, and it was very exciting. He delved deep into the mechanics of strength. So Mechanics of Strength Part 2 with myself, Paul Bassett, James St. Pierre, and Peter Lant. Enjoy.
What I did essentially with my comfort zone expansion ethos was look at that very linear progression of progressively better ideas and look for the one common denominator in them all, and the one that jumps out the most in the most recent and best version, which is strength cycling. And what that is an increased time spent training in comfort. That's the main thing that seems to run through all the best conversations to have with the CNS in regards to increasing strength output up to now. And then I thought to myself, well, why are these programs peaking? Why are they pushing you towards, if the majority of the end strength is built by having a conversation with the central nervous system, with manipulating the mathematics of it in such a way that the weights you're lifting don't represent the percentages that they used to represent. Okay, if the easy work is what's responsible, if the base, if the width of the base is what's directly responsible for the height of the peak, right? If we're talking about a pyramid shape, right, which is what all strength cycling is essentially in terms of volume or intensity, right? An inverted pyramid in terms of intensity. If the width of the base is directly proportional to the height of the peak, then why are we peaking? Right? If the common denominator in progressively better conversations is increased time spent training in comfort, and the reason, let's face it, that strength athletes tolerate the need to peak is because they must compete, right? So what I'm here today to tell everybody listening to this is, and I include myself in this, the vast majority of the people alive in the world right now, or who will ever live, or who have ever lived, have no right to ever train to a 1 rep maximum for any reason other than ego, right? Listen to me. There's no good reason to do it. You've no right. Not only do you not have a need, you've no right to, right? I was talking with a strength coach online recently who made the mistake of getting into a debate with me about this. Right? It was a bit of a mistake. His point wasn't a bad point, but what he was trying to convey was that there was a lot of value in the different percentages and proximities to 1 rep max, and in this linear or step or wave progression from low to high, and that we should be doing this cyclic approach over set periods of time. There's more value in that than in expanding the base ever and ever and ever wider, because the body has to get good at lifting heavy weights if it's ever going to get good at lifting heavy weights. That was essentially his overarching point. He's not wrong, right? But here's the point. Why are you in such a rush to show off your 36 kilo 1 rep max kettlebell press? Why are you in such a rush to do that 150 kilo deadlift, right? Why are you in such a rush to get good at lifting what represents heavy for you? Because it's still light, right? Why don't you actually spend time getting as strong as possible so that there's a point at some stage? Yes, you're right. In order to maximize your 1 rep max strength, regardless of how expanded your comfort zone has been, if you are going to do it, there will have to be a period where you peak that strength, right? 3 stars, 10 points, high five, you're right. But there's no point in doing that unless there's something worth peaking, right? And if you can always get stronger faster by just expanding the base ever and ever wider, thus creating the potential for an ever higher virtual peak that you can't even see and might never even go to, because you're just getting stronger and stronger to the point where your comfort zone envelops what used to be your limit, and now you're wrapping it for a number of sets and a number of reps. Why do you even care what your 1 rep max is? The second most asked question I ever get is, what's your max? I always get it in relation to the kettlebell press, because people see me do things like 40 reps with 40 kilos, right? Or 10 or 12 reps with 60 kilos with 1 arm in a row with no leg drive. And people are like, well, what's your 1 rep max? I don't know. There you go. I can make estimations if you want, but I don't know and I don't care. I'm not concerned with what my 1 rep max is. The only thing I'm concerned with, and the only thing that my training is concerned with, and the only thing that the training that I recommend for my clients is concerned with, is raising that max. It's not displaying it. And every workout that's wasted displaying that max is actually several workouts wasted that could have been used raising that max.
I think one of the things you said in the first podcast we had, which really stuck with me, it was so simple, but it's something that you don't hear very often. You said, if your 10 rep max goes up, then your 1 rep max is going to go up. If your 5 rep max goes up, then your 1 rep max is going to go up, and it was just this kind of, this notion of this continually testing the 1 rep max. Like I think everybody, in every sort of teenage boy, probably when you go into the gym, almost every session you go in there and you're trying to lift heavier weight, which is the essence of, like you say, trying to force yourself to get stronger. Do you think that something like, I know it's not obviously calculated in the way that you calculate things and to the degree of complexity behind the scenes, but something like an easy strength program, which kind of is as it says, where you never go, you keep the weights relatively light and you lift within your comfort zone, and when it feels easy, you increase the weight a little bit. I mean, that's kind of the notion or the premise that you're talking about, isn't it?
Well, 100%. I mean, I love the book Easy Strength, which is why I'm in it. No, I was asked by Pavel, because this is, God, it must be 11 years ago. Pavel sent me an email because he had heard of success that I had with a program by the late Steve Justa, who died this year. God rest him. An absolute crazy, wild, maverick genius of strength, Steve Justa. Highly recommend every book he's ever written, especially Rock, Iron, Steel, I think it's called, or it's in one of those orders. Those 3 words in one of those orders. I think it's Rock, Iron, Steel by a guy called Steve Justa. And the Justa singles deadlift routine, right? Which I've used on numerous times with numerous clients. And what he wanted me to contribute to the Easy Strength book was the adaptations that I made to it. Okay, and in what ways I changed it to not just get 1, but 3, 4, 5, 6 cycles out of it with the same lifters, which put like 150, 200 pounds on their deadlift in like a year, right? Where I took a whole team of untrained teenagers, okay, and turned them into the national powerlifting champion team. They won the team championships and the Irish championships in their first year of competing, right? In 2008, we won the IDFP overall nationals with a bunch of novices, and broke records that still stand to this day in some case. And so, yes, books like Easy Strength and programs like Easy Strength, and even, even weight cycling in general. I've been doing this since the 90s, and I came up in a powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting gym in the 90s. And so they were doing Bulgarian and Russian weight cycling and percentage cycling even then. And back then my head was awash with numbers as it is today, and I've always had that ability to play with numbers in a way that, like applied maths more than pure maths, but I'm still good at pure maths, but applied maths more than anything. I've been able to apply that creatively to bring about outcomes and to spot patterns, create patterns. And to do that I'm essentially just applied that to the context of training. I've done that since the 90s, and competing at a national level, international level in 3 different sports against world-class competition, 3 different sports, and even more than that if you want to include like weird strength like steel bending and all these strange odd lifting and all that stuff. I have my own experimental tool, and I've also trained numerous national champions and even 5 world champions from scratch. So I've been refining this process over time, creating all-time record holders in powerlifting and kettlebell sport, which I deliberately set it to do, by the way. I deliberately, because I have this frame of mind that everything is maths. Everything is maths. Strength is maths, so is endurance. Okay. And the interplay between the two is a lot closer than most people realize, which is another one of my more quotable quotes, is that rep ranges are bullshit. I'll get into that, right? It's a bit clickbaity. They're not totally bullshit, right? But, and yes, title. Yes, certain training in certain rep ranges does emphasize certain things a bit better than others. However, they are what a more accurate quote might be. Now that I'm not trying to grab as much attention, now that I have the attention I was trying to grab when I was younger, is that rep ranges are subservient and way more irrelevant than people like to think, in terms of their relevance or their importance to bringing about changes in qualities, i.e. strength, endurance, in and of themselves. So one of the things that I wanted to do was create high performers in the extremes. Okay, so I created world champions in powerlifting and Ireland's highest totaling Irish-born powerlifter, and I created world champions in kettlebell sport and Ireland's highest totaling Irish amateur kettlebell sport athlete. Right. So pound for pound and absolute in some ways.
Who we've had on the podcast.
Who you've had on the podcast,
yeah.
Finn Bartulin. And the point is that numbers are numbers, and that the body's adaptations, no matter what the outcome is always a conversation, and you'll always get there faster by convincing it to allow you to use more of what's already there or less of what's already been predetermined to get the job done, rather than trying to force it over and over again. And yeah, that kind of ties into what you said at the start. Your 10 rep max, it's all about progress, right? It's just, that's the only point. Let me get this across to the viewers, to the listeners. Everybody thinks, right, I'm doing 10 reps, so I'm training for size. I'm doing 5 reps, so I'm training for strength. I'm doing 1 rep, so I'm training for power. Well, actually, that's a product of speed, really, as well, or acceleration. Ironically, when you're at a 1 rep max, the rate of force production, or the actual velocity of the barbell, is actually at its lowest. It's comparable to the last rep of any rep max. People don't realize that as well when they factor in fatigue. Oh, I'm going light, so it's going to be less fatiguing than the CNS. Well, I just did a 20 rep max, did you? So you did all that work, and then you had a 1 rep max at the end. So, you know what I mean? So your first rep was 60% probably, because the 20 rep max. and it went up 1%, probably, and then started jumping 2% and 3% until by the last rep, it was 100%. That was a 1 rep max in that moment. Within the context of that reality, that was a 1 rep max in that moment. And, systematically, it might not be quite as hard because the total weight on the bar isn't the same. But in terms of the hormonal response and all these different things and the systematic fatigue, it's worse because you not only did a 1 rep max, you did on every rep max or on every proximity to that before that, right down as far as 60%. So you essentially did a whole workout in one set, right up to 1 rep max. So yeah, rep ranges are displays of physical qualities. They're not necessarily builders of them unless they are, okay? But you're never going to build a rep max by doing a rep max with it. You can still use that rep maximum to build that rep maximum, but not by doing the rep maximum with it. So let's say you want to increase your 75% 1 rep max, and that happens to be 10 rep max, okay? Because you're of average fiber type. You can increase your 10 rep max using your 10 rep max, but not by doing 10 reps with it in any one set. Now you still can, especially if you're a beginner, right? But as I said, it's finite. And let me give you a pragmatic example. So let's just say we take an individual who's, their 10 rep max is whatever it is, and that's 75% of their 1 rep max. And the program stipulates, as many typically do, to do 3 sets of 10 with your 10 rep max, which doesn't even make any logical sense unless you're doing 1 set this week and the other set next week, and then the other set the week after that. Because your 10 rep max is not your 3 sets of 10 rep max, it's your 10 rep max. So what are we talking about? Let's get clear. Is it your 3 sets of 10 rep max, which is probably an 11 or 12 rep max, or is it a true 10 rep max? If it's a true 10 rep max, that's going to look like, depending on rest periods, anywhere between, if you're taking short rest periods, which is normally recommended, which makes even less sense, 10, 7, 6 or 5. If we're talking like 90-second rests, you do longer rests, you might go 10, 8, 7, right? So what's that, 25 reps? Great. So what's the goal? To get up to 30 and then eventually add weight and go through this laborious process all over again? Well, that's not what happens, because a maximum is always a maximum, right? You're not going to increase your 1 rep maximum by continuing to lift it. It's going to go down. So eventually the same thing's going to happen to your 10 rep max, because that 10th rep in that moment is a 1 rep max. It's a max. A max is a max. If you can't deadlift, if a weight's too heavy to deadlift, you're never going to lift it by keep going over and trying to lift it, right? You have to lift the weights that you can lift to gain the ability to lift the weights that you can't, right? So there's a similar thing that applies to maxing out. You're not going to increase your max by maxing out beyond a certain point. The adapter-die response is very finite, and how finite that is directly proportional to how responsive of an individual you are, or what you are as an individual, right? Are you a young man who's never trained before with good genetics? Okay, it's going to be a higher ceiling, but it's still going to come sooner rather than later. And any regression from that optimal individual, it's going to come even faster, right? So that's not going to work. Let's follow that individual may have experienced a higher hormonal response if we measure a workout in isolation versus a submaximal workout. Testosterone, growth hormone, cortisol, all these things will go up higher in response to a maximum workout, but that's looking at a modality in singularity. That's not looking at the ultimate destination for something like this. Let's look at that for a while, okay? 12 weeks down the line, where's our failure guy? He's probably regressing. Even if he's got great genetics, he at best has added a few reps, right? But let's take the same individual, a genetic clone of the same individual, but instead of doing a 10 rep max and then progressively less and less, let's do 20 sets of 3. Let's do 20 sets of 3. Okay, so the first set is a 3 out of 10 on an RPE, 30% effort, right? The last set, even though it's 20 sets, is probably a 5 out of 10. Like how tired are you going to get? Do you know what I mean? Doing 3 reps with your 10 rep max, it's going to be quite easy unless you're literally doing them with no rest, and that's just stupid. Okay, so that's on you. If you're taking reasonable rest, at best, the 20th set is a 5 RPM. Okay, and that's 60 reps. Okay, so that's more than double. That's 2.4 times the volume, right? And you perceived it as between 70 and 50% easier, right? With the same percentage, okay? Because whether or not you did 7 reps, 10 or 5 for the max out guy, I'm still 100% because it was just relative to your fatigue. And over time, that's only going to get harder and not easier. That's the reality. For most people, that maximum workout's only going to get harder. And you're going to start overtraining. You're going to start feeling that wee sore thing at the back of your throat. Your grip's going to feel weak and your nervous system's getting burnt out. That's what the ultimate destination of that is.
You put a great post up when you started another training cycle for yourself, which was very easy. And you said if you don't start easy enough, you'll end too hard.
Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing to be lost from starting too easy, but there's everything to be lost from starting too hard. You know, and if you don't start too easy, you will end too hard, and it will come sooner rather than later. So let's just look at that 20 sets of 3 guy though, right? In 12 weeks time, where can he be? You think he can be at 20 sets of 6 if the numbers are manipulated properly along the way? You betcha he can. You betcha he can, right? Now that's 120 reps, right? Now that's 4.8 times the volume. Nearly 5 times the volume with the same load. And the RPE on the 20th set has probably only crept as far as 8, I would say, at a guesstimation. Remembering that it probably would only have been a 10 if he'd have done it on day 1. But this is months down the line. He's spent expanding up to this point. So by the time he get it, on day 1, he might not have got 20 sets of 6, but he might have. But the last few sets might have been a 10 out of 10 RPE. But he didn't do that. He did 20 sets of 3, and he cycled it slowly. He manipulated the mathematics in a way that progressed it up in volume without a proportionate increase in RPE. And eventually he got to the point where that last set was potentially, if you spend 3 months doing it, what, an 8 out of 10, right? So he's now doing nearly 5 times the volume, or 4.8 to be precise, with the same load. And even at the end, still perceiving it as 20% easier. That's a better way to train. And that's one of many innumerable ways to expand the comfort zone. And that's actually a really basic configuration. Nothing wrong with basic, but that's just something to make it easier for the listeners to get their head around the concept of how to do it. It's not just about coming in. It's not about the hormone response in a singular workout. It's not about the maximum recoverable volume, right? It's about those things only if you're stupid enough to go there without expanding into it, so that by the time you get there, it represents less than it did before you went there, right?
Can I ask, Paul, if you're training in the way that you've just explained, to have the conversation with the central nervous system to release more strength to you and for you to enable to get stronger that way, is there also a kind of an inadvertent fiber size increase as well?
100%.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're going to do that style of comfort zone expansion, that programmatic variable configuration of, you know, that much volume, then yeah, you're going to be bigger, especially if that volume is increasing and you're able to get stronger within the loading parameters that are conducive to muscular hypertrophy. You're definitely going to get bigger. As a matter of fact, that's the fastest way to get bigger, right? When people say to me, well, you know, your CNS isn't allowing you more muscle, that actually physically builds. And oh, yes, again, high five, but doesn't matter, right? Because optimizing the process that facilitates that physical thing to happen is still allowing you to use more. It's still the mechanism of allowing you to use more strength within the loading parameters that will break down myofibrils to allow the supercompensation to take place, which enables muscle growth, right? So it's still the same thing, whether you want size without strength or strength without size, or size on strength. It's still the same thing. The only thing that changes there is the loading parameters, right? And the programmatic variables. So you can expand the comfort zone in a way that won't create muscle growth as well. But that is an example I just came off the top of my head. I've given that one a few times actually in podcasts, so remember it as a good example of an easy way of how you can take something as habitually unsuccessful as 3 sets of 10 to failure, using the same weights, configure the numbers in a different way, and get way more strength and size out of it. And the interesting thing about that is, James, it alludes to what you said too earlier. The reps, for the most part, are in the strength building zone, right? You're doing sets of 3. When has anybody ever spoken about sets of 3 in terms of building muscle, right? And let's look at the intermediary steps between 3 and 6. But you're going to be doing 4s, you're going to be doing 5s, and you're going to be doing 6s. Only at 6 is considered by most bodybuilding fraternities as the bare minimum amount for eliciting appreciable muscle growth, with some coming at 5 and almost nothing coming below 5. And that's not true, right? Rep ranges are largely misunderstood, okay? Doing a particular number of reps, as I said before, is an expression of strength. It's not necessarily a builder of a quality. It's an expression of it. The main thing is to be able to get better, right? If you can, let's take this one to the bank. I'm going to sum up everything in one line, try my best, right? If you can figure out a way to manipulate the programmatic variables and the mathematics around them, i.e. sets, reps, density, distribution of weight even, right? Leverages, different things in such a way as to bring about an increase in those said variables, i.e. volume, intensity. We'll just say load in this case. If you can get stronger within the loading parameters that are conducive to any goal, be that strength without size or size, you will gain that quality. You will increase that quality regardless of what the individual reps you were doing in any one set. The overarching thing that encompasses everything is progress. That's it. Are you getting better? And how comfortable was it? The one thing that maybe dictates progress or predicts the overall productivity of a potential cycle put together for the purpose of bringing about an improvement in a physical quality in a human being is increased time spent training in comfort. Okay, if you can increase the comfort zone, you will be able to increase the amount of weight and or volume and or density that you're doing without a proportionate increase in RPE, right? So if I took you into a gym right now and you did a 1 rep max, right? Okay, and then you did a 10 rep max, and then I made, sorry, let's just say we did a 10 rep max, and that's 75%, and then I added 5%, right? Now obviously fatigue is going to make it disproportionately higher than 80% after a while, but the point is there's a direct correlation. There's always a direct correlation in the moment between percentage of 1 rep max and percentage of maximum mobility with that weight. In other words, your 10 rep max is always going to be what 75% represents to you at that time. Okay. And whatever 80% represents, depending on fiber type, to be anywhere between 3 and 6 rep max. That's what it's going to represent to you always a 3 rep max or a 6 rep max is always going to represent 80% to you. Okay. So if you can configure the mathematics around your programmatic progression in such a way that the weight has increased without a proportionate increase happening in RPE, that's stronger. Okay. So it's 75% on the bar, but it doesn't feel like 75% anymore. That's stronger. And that's the only thing that all your training should be slave to. Okay. The amount of volume that you can recover from, the amount of reps that you do in any one set to train a certain quality, the rest periods, the total volume, the total load, the weekly load, the total tonnage, all these things are slave to the overlord that is comfort zone. Because if you're progressing the weights in such a way that it's going up without a proportionate increase in RPE, then all those other variables are constantly in flux anyway. So knowing what your maximum recoverable value is or volume is with a given load today is almost irrelevant if the training you're going to be doing today is going to be comfortable anyway, and you're going to be expanding it to a point where it goes beyond what used to be your maximum recoverable volume, but now it's okay because you're stronger, right? So people trying to say, right, okay, the best way to build size is to do 20 sets, let's say. That's kind of a buzz term going around now. 20 weekly sets is the best, has been shown in studies, right? Again, has been shown in studies. Studies show, anybody that starts off with studies show, you need to check their resume to see what person has achieved, right? Studies show should be followed by inquiry into person achieved, right? Because if person hasn't achieved much with themselves or other people, then studies don't, what studies show probably don't really mean much to that person, or whatever it is they're saying might not apply to your training as strongly as you'd hope it might. So studies show that 20 sets generically, right, is a good ballpark weekly figure to increase muscular size optimally in any one muscle group. Well, that depends how hard those sets are. That depends what those are sets of. That depends on who the individual is, what their experience is. But it depends more than anything on how easy it was. It depends more than anything on how comfortable it was. And it depends more than anything what the mathematic progression is going to be next, right? What's next week, right? I can make you bigger on 5 sets, and I can make you bigger on 20 sets, and I can make you bigger on 40 sets. And if you find out today that your maximum recoverable volume is 20 sets, well, I'm going to ask you 20 sets at what intensity? 20 sets at what rate of perceived exertion? 20% or 20 sets at what proximity to maximum effort on every given set? Okay, because those are all variables that change what you can maximally recover from and change what your body's going to optimally grow from. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's 20, it doesn't matter if it's 10, it doesn't matter if it's 1. If I can make you, let's take this to the bank. If in 6 months' time, the weight on the bar, if today your bench press is 100 kilos for 10, and in 6 months' time, it's 140 kilos for 10, you're going to be bigger. Done. Even over one set. Maybe not so much. It starts coming into play if it's 1 set of 3, right? You might not be that much bigger then. You're going to be a lot stronger though. But if it's 20 sets of 3, yes, you will be bigger again. So it's getting a certain volume, yes, but and maximum volume is important, but it's all slave to how easy the workout is, right? You can't say, you know, this is your maximum recoverable volume, because how you recover from it is relative to how hard it was, you know, and where it's going is directly proportional to how you're able to progress it while still keeping it easy relative to the weight that it represents in proximity to your max. Is any of that clear, or was all
it is. But I think what I like about this is it actually ties in a little bit to one of our previous guests, Stuart McGill. You know, one of the things he, you know, some words of warning there. He said, look, you know, how many people do you see at age 75 who aimed for very high numbers in their lifts, because it comes at a cost. Whereas this kind of method does take into account a certain level of safety.
Yes.
Now, I remember when I was reading the course material for the Amazing 12, there's obviously an element to strength training we've not really discussed, which is, what is an optimal technique for that, i.e. barbells, kettlebells, etc., bench press, deadlifts, etc. It is a choice of what is the most effective exercise, but what is the safest.
Yeah.
And when you're working with these lower levels of perceived exertion and you're playing with these, manipulating these variables, we also take into account the body's adaptive process and the safety mechanisms around it. Means that you have more longevity, so you can train for longer, you can train without injury, you can recover faster.
Yep.
And that's important, I think, when it comes to making strength over the long term.
Well, think about this, right? Safety and strength should be synonymous, and the same way to increase one is the best way to increase the other. And that applies both technically, in terms of the actual technical execution of a lift, or it should do anyway, as well as the programmatic design around what programmatic framework and maths you're going to be using and progression pattern that you're going to be using around that lift. So doing less reps is only safer if proximity to maximum effort remains the same. Okay, so there's going to be less to get wrong, and it'll be easier to keep things right if the reps are lower, but that's directly proportional to the level of effort as much as anything else. It's far safer to do 10 reps with something you could do 20 with than it is to do 5 reps with something you could do 6 with, right? Or 7 even, right? Because the difficult reps are more distal and on the weights later. So systematically, it's just far easier and far safer, even though the reps are double. So there's twice as much chance to make a mistake, but it's not happening in the same environment. So it's comparing apples and oranges, and that changes the game entirely again. So everything is slave to relative comfort. Everything is slave to that, and everything is optimized by being able to spend the longest time period possible in that while expanding it and not coming out of it. The wider the base, the higher the peak of the pyramid. Full stop. And if we're not strength athletes, sometimes a peak creeps up on you out of the blue. Sometimes life gets in the way. Sometimes something happens. Sometimes it's forced. And sometimes if you really know what you're doing, you can program that in and make it so that you're able to do it with very little cost. But my general rule of thumb, and I mean, I apply it as much, I try my best to be as much a champion of it myself as just paying lip service to it. If I can't battle test this and prove it within my own physicality, which is the physicality of a lanky, long-limbed, middle-aged man who trains alone with a ginger beard in a garage with 4 kids and the stress of running a global company from the house, and you know, constant things coming left and right from the children, sometimes literally while you're training, right? If I can't make it work for me, then I shouldn't be even talking about it to other people. Okay. And it was a 4-year project to go from a 4-rep max on a kettlebell press with 40 kilos with no leg drive to a sub-maximal as hell 40-rep set, 40 reps in a row with one arm on a kettlebell press with the same technique. So you say what you want about me being leaning to the side a wee bit and doing this and that. I did that with the 4-rep max as well. So the progress was relative to the technique. So it was genuine progress. It was a genuine, what was that, a 1,000%, but it was more than that. It was probably 1,500% because I didn't go to the max. I probably had 60, right? That sounds ridiculous, but look at the rep speed of the 40th rep and tell me there was an appreciable difference between that and the first, right? And this is a product of optimal technique, optimal programming, and 25 years of psychology around knowing not to give up and different things, right? But the point of the matter is that these methods must work. I must battle test them. I must battle test them in order to actually espouse them, if that makes any sense. So what were you saying, Paul? What was your point? I think I've lost it a wee second.
I think it was just about the interplay between safety
Yes.
and strength, really, and particularly things like tendons and stuff like that, which obviously generate power as well.
Yes. So yes, well that was the point. The point is it should always be easy, right? And if you look at that 40 rep set of mine, right? And yes, it carries more risk to lift a half body weight kettlebell 40 reps in a row with one arm, no leg drive, anything can go wrong, right? And I literally had 40 opportunities for something to go wrong. And I actually had thousands of opportunities over the 4-year period, right, for something to go wrong. However, if you're training, if your high reps can be safer than lower reps, because it's overarchingly slave to, percentage of maximum exertion. So when we see, when I could have done the 40 reps maybe a year or 2 years, maybe at least 18 months before I did it, but I didn't want to do it hard. I wanted to wait to the point. I wanted to envelop my max. First of all, I had to reach that max, and I reached that max in estimation 12 to 18 months prior. But then I felt I needed more time to envelop it by a sufficient enough percentage so that it would be a non-event when I did it, and it would be safe. Because I'm getting too old to dislocate my shoulder or tear my rotator cuff for the sake of just a set of kettlebell press. So yes, it can be safer than lower reps. It's all about effort rather than rep range.
Brilliant. Well, I think it's probably a good place to end. I think I mean it's such a deep subject, and I have a lot of experience going through your system with my clients and seeing the effects that it has on their bodies. Everyone from experienced lifters through to complete novices, and that's what I like about it. And obviously me and Peter are training with you, and I'm fully aware that your interpretation of comfort sometimes is at odds with my comfort. But
well, let me define this once and for all, because it is misunderstood. It is misunderstood. Comfort's a relative terminology. Physical training, and especially something like GS, is never going to be comfortable. Kettlebells are innately uncomfortable, and GS is probably one of the toughest ways to do kettlebells. But submaximal or RPE shouldn't be attributed based on how much the set sucked, right? Based on how much pain you were in or how much emotional stress it caused. It should only be relative to how many reps you had in the tank had you pushed further, right? And that is almost always invariably linked to rep speed, right? So whether or not the 20 reps of squat sucked to the point where you wanted to kill yourself, right? If I had to put a gun to your head and you could have done 40, and that was a 5 then, right? That's the truth. Now, squats are different. I took that as a deliberate example because squats are so hard, and because such a big oxygen debt, because they use so much muscle, and they provide so much structural rest that you're always able to do more reps with a higher percentage of your 1 rep maximum, because almost your body turns into a power rack because it's stacked over your skeleton and your muscles can rest. And it's almost like 20 sets of one and it is 1 set of 20. But again, if you could keep going to the point where you could double your reps, then that was only a halfway effort, right? And that's something to be remembered, right? If that was a 10 rep max and you did 7, it's not going to be easy, but it was a 7 out of 10. It wasn't a 9. It wasn't a 10. I have people who send me things going, I think that was a 10. And it's like, they could have done another 5 reps. And it's like, no, it might have sucked, but it wasn't a 10, because a 10 means you can't do another one, right? So that's something to remember. It's not about how much it hurts. It's about how many more could you do. You know, like I wasn't particularly comfortable sitting in the rack with that 40 kilo kettlebell. It was soul destroying from about 20 reps on. But if I had wanted to, I could have kept going to the tune of another 20 reps. You know, so maybe a 7.
Yeah, no, it's been a big education for me because a lot of the mental aspects have been very beneficial for me, and I think working within that relative comfort zone does stop you doubting yourself as much, because it's quite easy to go in there and psych yourself out about a weight. The weight becomes this big thing that you kind of have to compete against, you have to fight against, and you just take away all that unnecessary posturing and just get on with the job. You just show
the weight will
up.
take care of itself if everything else is expanded.
Yeah.
That's
it. I mean, I remember, I was struggling with a 24 when I started to work with you. And then I remember being knackered one weekend and walking past my kettlebells and then just banged out 20 reps with 20 kilos. And I picked up the 24, banged out 10 reps. And then I did 36 kilos in the end. And it felt all right, and I was knackered as well, but for some reason, I just fancied doing it, and I'd never done that before.
And that was pre-exhausted?
Well, it was because I hadn't slept because of the kids.
Wow.
But I hadn't worked out. It was early in the morning. For some reason, I just fancied it that day,
Yeah. It's amazing how much strength you can build when you're not trying to, really. Peter is another great example. Recently, he hasn't been training, correct me if I'm wrong, with anything heavier than 24 kilos, really, in a press, in a double press. And it was actually a cleaning press, not even really doing the press ever. And just for shits and giggles, he did the single arm press. I made a technical adjustment in his technique. And all of a sudden he went from, 27 reps to 100?
No, I did 18 each side.
So 36 reps to...
Yeah, and then you tweaked my technique, and then I did 100. I did 50 each side, like in sets, not all in one go, obviously, but without putting the bell down, I did 100. Yeah.
and then hit a lifetime best single bell press for a double that you'd never lifted once, and we haven't even been doing the press with anything heavier than 24 kilos, and we haven't even been doing the press. It was the cleaning press.
No, exactly, yeah, and that was after a 6-hour drive home from a 2-week holiday as well.
So there's Paul and Peter. Again, James, what's keeping you? I will. I'm only joking. I had to hit it. It was just sitting there. But no, the only point I'm making there is that's not even really optimal. We could have peaked Peter and Paul towards higher weights than that. That would have been a more accurate representation of the width of their base. But it shows the power of that type of comfort zone expansion training, that just for shits and giggles, you can pick up a heavier weight than you never have and just lift it in a way that you haven't done in ages by virtue of something much easier and slightly different. The what the hell effect, I believe it's sometimes referred to as.
Yeah. And that's it. It's just getting out of the way of yourself and just letting the work do the work, essentially.
Yeah.
Look, this has been absolutely fascinating. This is kind of what we needed after that initial chat we had about the A12 and about you and your kind of background. This is kind of, and particularly for those people who are listening who perhaps go into a gym, don't know what to do. Some of this may have sounded like it was kind of pretty complex, but kind of in a way, this is why it's so important to have a coach. And it's why we have Paul as our coach, is because he's kind of done a lot of this thinking. And literally, I just get an email, get a message saying, this is what you're doing this week. And and then I know what I'm doing. And I know that he's done all this thinking behind the scenes, and I just have to do what's written down. And kind of that's why it's so important sometimes to have a coach, because it just allows you to get on with the work. And if you can do the work, then you'll get the result. Because otherwise you just spend all the time in an armchair thinking about the optimal program, and sometimes you just need to do it.
Yeah.
But thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Peter, have you got anything you'd like to leave us with? You've been quiet.
I know. I've got loads of questions, but Paul was on, when Paul starts talking, you've got.
I'm sorry.
No, but you've always got somewhere where you're going, so it's you don't want to stop you mid-flow.
Yeah.
So I've got loads of questions. One thing I was going to say halfway through was that poor fella with the boulder. It's a pity Norris McWhirter wasn't there with his camera crew and that.
Yeah.
Like, I've set a world best there, and there was no one
Yeah.
around to see it. But anyway,
Like Roy Castle or something, no record breakers.
yeah, exactly. But no, I mean, I've got loads of questions, but like, it's just, I'm gonna have to go back and listen to this again, actually, because like everything you've said, there's like I say, it all goes somewhere, and there's and the thing about the numbers behind it and all the thinking behind it makes perfect sense. But I couldn't go through it all again. I'd have to listen to it again because I couldn't. I couldn't
be one of those ones for people. Yeah.
But what's been great is working with you since January. Is my strength's gone up and my comfort zone's expanded and all that. That's clearly obvious. But it's changed the way I think about working with people as well. Because I like, working with general population, all of that. It's staying away from all that, like you said, staying away from the 1 rep maxes and all that, like Stuart McGill was talking about 2 weeks ago or whenever it was. And it's staying away from that and keep the person going forever until they're 70, 80 years old, and that's exactly it. And staying away from like, I want to build loads of muscle and I want to do this and I want to do that. It's like, let's just increase your rep maxes. And that thing about increasing the base as well, and like what James said that you said on the last thing was you increase any rep max and all rep maxes go up.
Yes.
So you can, it doesn't matter where you are.
If you increase your any rep max, you increase your every rep max. It's as simple as that. You can't make significant numeric improvement in 70% and not affect 100% and every percentage below that. It's mathematically impossible.
But that's where you'll get people saying, we were talking about this with Dan the other day, and it's like, you might get somebody who does 10 reps at, I don't know, like 100 kilos on the deadlift, but their maximum's 105.
Yeah.
Right. But that doesn't matter. If you increase your,
yeah.
But if you increase your 10 rep max, your 1 rep max still goes up. It, regardless of how far away they are from each other.
We're going over 2 hours here, but I'm going to take us over because I need to speak briefly on the phenomenon that you just mentioned. Or well, I'm not.
Stop it here.
It's just getting beyond the point. But suffice to say that that's down to neurological efficiency. There's people who are less neurologically efficient than others. Ironically, those who are more neurologically efficient can do less reps with any given percentage of their 1 rep max, but can make bigger jumps between said percentages. And then the inverse is also true of people who are less neurologically efficient. They can do more reps with any given percentage of their 1 rep max, but they can make less of a weight jump between said percentages. And it's actually something that's on average observed between the genders of men and women, in that all other things being equal. I am not saying there's not a woman who's more neurologically efficient than most men. There probably is, but even the male version of that woman will be more neurologically efficient than she is. Okay, so the all other things being equal, the male version of any human being will have a higher level of neurological efficiency than the female version in terms of muscle innervation, and will be able to do less reps with any given percentage on every exercise. And then the opposite is true of the woman. It's very interesting.
I see that in the A12.
Yeah, you do. And you also see it bore out in extreme endurance sports. A lot of the ultra marathon records are actually held by women, believe it or not, because at the extreme end of slow twitch muscle fiber distribution among men and women, we're not entirely sure what it is. Is it a higher percentage fat reserve? Is it some sort of higher mental strength? Is it a higher pain threshold? Is there something genetic there in relation to childbirth that women have that we don't know about, that's better than what men have? We don't know what, but fiber type distribution might have something to do with it. Later bone structure might have something to do with it. Later overall body weight might have something to do with it. Higher body fat percentage might have something to do with it. We don't know, but there's super endurance records that like the absolute record is held by a woman, and men haven't been able to break it.
What do the studies show?
I know. Yeah. And
James?
on that note,
Yeah, well, I've written down. I've got some quotes on a page here that I'm definitely going to be sharing from the podcast, and I will. I've got a few things coming up between now and the start of October, and then I'm going to I'll ping Paul a message over the next few days to discuss sorting me out, I think.
yeah.
But
It's about time, ladies and gentlemen.
So I've got the SFB, then I've got the SFG at the start of October, and then I'm gonna
Show up like a strong SOB.
and then
Can I request you make it do an exercise, Paul?
What's that? Sorry.
Well, sets of 12 with the back squat and then jump squats.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, can you make
Just
it
get
do
him
that
doing
for me?
Yeah, we'll throw that in.
Start me off very, very gently. Start me off. I want to, but no, that's been brilliant, and that's been a really, really, really fascinating episode. And I know that's just sort of built upon. But like we said right at the start, if people haven't listened to, hopefully they have by now, because they haven't listened to that 2 hours without the previous one. But if you listen to that first episode 22. Followed by this is a real strength education for 2 podcasts back to back. I think it's fantastic. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'll wrap up, and I think this is the first podcast that we've had that's had a mention of Roy Castle. So
that's a shame. There should be more.
I know, exactly. Some old school cultural references there. But anyway, thanks for listening to the Health Audit Podcast. We've been with Paul McIlroy. Paul, where can people find out more information about what you do?
This is the part that I'm terrible with, because sometimes I don't even know. Well, there's the amazing12.com website is where you find out most about what I do, and probably the thing that I'm most well known for. And that's amazing, the word 12, the numbers 12.com. There's a lot of free education stuff on there. There's video series where I'm explaining different things, talking about different stuff. There's articles on there. You might like that. And then just on Facebook, you can find me. It's just my name, and it's a profile picture of me looking like me. You can't miss it. It's just a dude with a ginger beard who looks upset, with a big 12 on his chest. And the same thing for Instagram. And I believe that the hip kids these days are calling it your handle. My handle on Instagram is Paul McIlroy, amazing12. Again, just the numbers 12, and that's it.
I'm looking forward to the TikTok.
Yeah.
No, but do you even know what TikTok is? Or maybe it's...
No. I see a bunch of people doing dances to music, and then I don't know.
Yeah. So, well, thanks for listening, guys. Please do subscribe, do a review. And we have got a few reviews on the podcast, but we'd love to have a few more. Share it with friends. And we've also got the Health Oddity group, which is a Facebook group, which we're starting to build a few more members there. So please do invite yourself into that, and we'll let you in. Join. It's free. You don't have to commit to anything. So just we discuss things and post the new episodes. But thanks, James and Peter, and thank you again, Paul. And we'll see you all next week.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.